Shalom, my friends, and welcome back to another edition of Parsha Perspectives. We dedicate today's lesson to the merit of our brave soldiers, heroes in body and soul. May the Almighty bless and protect them, and may they complete their mission quickly and totally, and return home very soon, happy and healthy and whole. At the same time, Yibadei L'chaim Tovim, we dedicate the lesson in memory of the holy and pure soldiers who have made the ultimate sacrifice to defend their people and land, and the Kedoshim, the holy ones, who gave their souls in sanctification of God's name. Hashem Yunkom Damam, may God avenge their blood. In Jewish tradition, we actually make a very big deal about names. You know, the Torah believes that a name is not just a random identifier to distinguish between people, but actually it's a calling card. It represents the essential identity of the person who bears that name. In a word or two, the person's name actually describes the unique personality of the name bearer, or maybe even the main events that will happen, or may have not happened, or that will not happen to that person. So the Torah therefore usually explains the names of the important personalities that the Torah discusses. For example, take like the name of the famous biblical character, Noach. The Torah teaches that at his birth there was a hope that this person, would be named Noach. Why? Because later on, when the world was at a corrupt point, God said, Noach, he is someone who gives us rest from the work and from the toil of our hands from the ground. Noach was a man that brought peace, calmness, and comfort to God. Abraham was called Avraham, which means a father of a multitude of nations, to influence everyone to believe in one God. Yitzchak, our second of our forefathers, means to be happy and to smile, because his parents were given his notification at a late age that they'll have a child. They gave him Yitzchak, they smiled. And the same with Jacob. Every name has an explanation why they were given that name. And in this week's portion, many of the 12 tribes were born. Reuven was from the word see. God said, see, God gave me a son. He saw my affliction. And Shimon, the second of the tribes, is from the word Shama, because she says, oh, God heard my prayer. How about Levi? Levi is from the word connection. This son will connect me and my husband. And so on and so forth. And finally, the famous name of Yehuda, the fourth of the 12 tribes, which is from thank you, acknowledgement. The word Yehudi, Jew, means someone who acknowledges all the time and thanks God, especially related to the weekend of Thanksgiving. But it's very interesting. There's one child that stands out. Her name was Dinah. And the Torah tells us that Leah had a daughter named Dinah. And it doesn't really give us the reason for it in the Torah itself. The Torah doesn't say why. Only one of the children born doesn't give us a reason. Why was she called Dinah? Why not Chana? Why not Miriam? I mean, shouldn't she also get an explanation? Why did she get that name? And in fact, the first person actually named in the Torah by another person was Eve. Adam named Eve. Why did she get the name Eve, Chava? Because she was Aim Kol Chai, because she was the mother of all life. And to magnify this perplexity, Rashi, the great commentary, cites in the verse where it says, our sages actually explained, you know why Leah gave the name Dinah? Because she pronounced judgment upon herself. And she said, I'm expecting my 7th child. If this child is a male, a boy, my sister Rachel won't even have as many children as one of the handmaids, because she had 6. Each of the other 2 handmaids had 2. She knew 12 tribes have to be born. And if she has a boy, that means Rachel is only going to have 1 boy. And she didn't want to embarrass her sister to have less than the handmaids. So she brought judgment upon herself. And the word Dinah, and when she had a feeling that she's going to have a boy, and there were no ultrasounds, but she was a holy lady, she knew. She says, I don't want my sister Rachel, she was so sensitive, to have less sons than the handmaids, and therefore she judged on herself that this child should become from a girl to a boy. And from the word judgment, she gave the name Dinah, which means judgment. I mean, think of that sensitivity from one sibling to another. And this is an explanation in the Talmud that God actually heard the voice of Leah, and she brought that judgment upon herself, and therefore she had a girl, and Rachel ended up having 2 boys, Joseph and Benjamin. But why doesn't the Torah mention this wonderful story about Dinah's name? Why do we have to only find it out later on in the commentaries? Now, friends, only the heart of a true Jewish leader, sensitive to the pain and distress of an individual, can answer this question with simple clarity and clear simplicity. The Rebbe actually explained in a talk given in 1972, this week, 52 years ago, the Rebbe said that the inner meaning of the name Dinah was only within Leah's own heart. She had no intention to reveal her inner evaluations to the outside world by actually naming her daughter Dinah. After all, it came to be known that Leah was originally destined to give birth to a seventh son, as I shared. And only after internally judging and evaluating herself did this boy change over to become a girl, in order not to humiliate Rachel. And that is why Rashi is so careful to write that Leah pronounced judgment upon herself. Unlike with the other children, whose names were clear for all to understand, like Reuven and Shimon and Levi and Yehuda, nobody knew why Dinah got the name Dinah. I mean, Leah, her entire debate was between she and herself. It only came to light thousands of years later in the writings of our holy sages who came and gave that explanation. And the Rebbe mentions this profound kindness that just so casual, as if it were like most natural, self-evident thing in the world to do. However, thousands of shiurim, lessons, can be built on this model of sisterly love and brotherly love between Rachel and Leah, how much we can learn. Because as Jewish people, inherently kind and naturally compassionate, we love to give to others. However, let's be honest, also love and appreciation. We want acknowledgement for the kindness we do good. We want people to recognize it. You know, we love to give money. We also love to receive recognition and appreciation in return. That's the nature. But rarely do we see the name anonymous on the facade of a great, big, beautiful center or a house of worship or a hospital or a library. Because we like people to know how generous we are, how loving we are. But Leah's greatness was that she understood what true kindness is. More than giving Rachel the enormous gift of a son to be born to her, Leah kept her self-sacrifice a complete secret between her and herself by holding Rachel's dignity. Her entire life, Rachel believed the miracle of her son was thanks to her own prayers. Completely innocent to the self-sacrifice of her sister Leah. Yet Leah knew that one thing is more important than even having your dreams fulfilled. Self-respect and self-worth. As our sages state in the Talmud, so great is the honor of the creations, means honoring one another, that it supersedes a prohibition of the Torah. In a similar vein, the Rebbe actually clarifies elsewhere the famous Mishnah in Ethics of Our Fathers. It actually says, someone who says shali shalach v'shalach shalach, which means whatever's mine is yours, and whatever is yours, means he's ready to give it all away, is a chassid. The simple meaning, at a chassid, a pious one, opens the door to the needy and shares with that poor everything he has. So the simple meaning needs a little clarification. Does he have to really give away everything he has? I mean, if he gives away all of his assets, he himself's going to become a pauper who's going to be forced to beg from others. So why is that considered good? Especially as our sages state that one shouldn't really give away more than a chomesh, which means one shouldn't really give away more than 20% of their assets to charity. So how then is a shali shalach, shalach shalach, which means what's mine is yours and yours is yours, a virtuous trait? So the Rebbe shares something so insightful. And the Rebbe says, when you pay close attention to the words of the Mishnah, what does it say? Ha'omer shali shalach chassid, which means one who just says, mine is yours and yours is yours as a chassid. It's not about physical possessions, but about personal commitment. For the chassid, my heart is your heart. My objective is your objective. My mission is to help you fulfill yours. It's not about giving all your money, but it's more even about giving all your heart. Kol halev. So the question really isn't how much, but how. The chassid, the pious one, does not go to the poor with a feeling of pity. He acts with an empathy that excuse selflessness. Thanks, accolades, or recognition are really not part of the equation. Yes, giving money supports life, but giving dignity and respect elevates life to a higher plane. Money keeps the poor man from going for the next few hours, but respect gets him back on his feet, and it revitalizes his confidence so much that he can actually self-support for the rest of his life, and ultimately, hopefully, with God's help, supporting others as well. There's a famous Talmud in Kiddushin that emphasizes this point with a very sharp statement. It says, one may feed his father pheasant, and this drives him from the world. While another may make for their father, another may make him grind a mill, yet this brings him to the world to come. What does it mean? There are children who feed their fathers luscious birds like pheasants, expensive meat, but they don't do it in the least respectful way. And then there are other children who inspire their fathers to work, but do it in the most empowering and respectful manner. Because really, it's not what they're doing for their fathers, but how. The first child serves his father fine, expensive pheasant, expensive meat. But when his dad asks, how's life? How's work? How's the family? Business must be good if you're serving your father such delicacies. But the son silences his father, or he ignores him. This type of behavior drives a person from the world. The second child, he doesn't give his father delicacies. Rather, he asks his father for help at the mill. He says, Dad, come help me. He gently empowers his father to work and ignites his confidence. And together, they are on the same mission, albeit without fatty, dripping luxury birds. That son is ushered in the world to come. Because giving a lot of money with a little heart might be philanthropy. But giving a little money with a great heart, with a lot of heart, that's a chassid. That's empathy. That's the way of the Jewish people. There's a famous philanthropist, Sammy Rohr, who was one of the largest donors to many, who helped build up Chabad on campus around the country and around the world. Today, his son, George Rohr, continues his family tradition of giving around the world, started many Chabad centers and many, many Chabad campuses where 3 of my brothers are rabbis. And more than the enormous quantity of their giving, the uniqueness of this family, called the Rohr family, is in the qualities of their giving. Because their faces light up, they listen, they advise, they empower. They make the beneficiary feel like the benefactor. And when they write a check, it's quite difficult to discern who's actually giving and who's receiving. And about 10 years ago, a colleague of mine, Rabbi Zalman Vyshetsky, he completed building a Chabad house in Basel, Switzerland. He's actually a cousin of mine too. And it was established with the donation of the Rohr family. The head of the family, Rabbi Sammy Rohr, he felt a deep connection to Basel, Switzerland, because during the war, World War II, he actually hid in the home of a Jewish family there. And he was very excited to return to the place where his life was saved, and he built this beautiful family, and he wanted to go back to participate in the dedication of the new Chabad Center, which he dedicated in honor of the family that actually hosted him and saved him during the war. And at the height, the pinnacle of this most beautiful event, Mr. Sammy Rohr relayed his inspiration of a model for giving. He said when the war broke out, he was a little boy. He was only 10 years old. His parents had to run away from the city, and they left him with a family friend. And that man gathered his children to the table, and he said, listen, children, today we welcome a new child into the family. His name is Shmuel Rohr. He is going to be one of the children in our family. And since he's the oldest, his place at the Shabbat table will be next to me, because he now becomes our oldest son. That, my friends, is dignity. You know, I grew up in Crown Heights. And before Sukkot, there's a tradition that everyone goes out to buy a beautiful etrog. Rabbi Klapman, who's a sofer, met a friend, Rabbi Gross, and he said, you know, Rabbi Gross asked me, did you buy an etrog for Sukkot? And I said, I didn't. She said, do me a favor. If you didn't buy one yet, I want you to go to this and this store that sells etrogs, because the owner of that store needs holiday income, and if you buy it from it, it'll be really nice. So he says, I went into the store to buy the etrog, and I really didn't find anything I liked. They were all very simple. I was going to leave without buying one. But just as I was about to leave, I saw a very wealthy man from the community go in, and he chose an etrog, and he paid whatever it was. I walked out of the store with him, and I said, Why'd you buy one here? There's nothing really nice here. Why can't you go? You're so wealthy. You can go to the nicest store and buy the nicest etrog. Because an etrog has to be beautiful. And the wealthy man said, for me, a beautiful fruit means giving a living to my fellow Jewish person. Rabbi Klapman heard this story, and he said, you know what? Beautiful generosity. But I'm sure he went and bought another one somewhere else to actually use on Sukkot. He said, I went to services on Sukkot, and I saw this very wealthy person making a blessing on the simple etrog that he bought from that store to provide sustenance to that other person. And I was surprised. Wow. He says, well, for me, the reason I bless on this, because this brought great dignity and great blessing to this man. It wasn't just about how I feel, it's about someone else feels. And he wanted to write this story about how this person did the mitzvah on such a high level, in such a beautiful way. He wanted to write it to the Rebbe, so the Rebbe can have nachas. So he went to the Rebbe's office. He says, do you think it would be okay to share such a story with the Rebbe? And the secretary of the Rebbe says, the Rebbe receives so many letters every day, so many challenges from all over the world. Don't you think he would have nachas, joy, hearing this, such a story about this rich man who put aside his own dignity in the honor of someone else's dignity? And he said he had this letter written up as a beautiful, beautiful poem in Hebrew, sharing about the brotherly love between one man and another who gave tzedakah in a way to make somebody else feel so good about themselves. And he said he wrote down this letter in a beautiful poem, and he had the Rebbe's secretary put it on the top of the pile of the Rebbe's letters. And the secretary told him, I watched the Rebbe go to the pile, and he took your letter first, and I wanted to see what's going to happen. How will the Rebbe's response to be? He says, the Rebbe started to read your letter, and I saw that he wasn't reading it quickly as he usually reads many letters, as he had so many. He was concentrating on every line of the story and each word. And the smile on the Rebbe's holy face grew bigger and bigger and caused a great sense of satisfaction. Because that's the true level of making someone else feel good. It's not just about the action. It's about the dignity of the other. And now, friends, we come full circle. And by applying these lessons we just shared with what's going on in the world now and in our own life. Because the Talmud tells us that when Yaakov, in this week's portion, he agreed to marry Rachel, he feared the last minute that Laban, his future father-in-law, was a swindler a bit. We'll switch, bait and switch, and instead of putting Rachel under the chuppah, we'll put Leah, because Leah was really older. So Yaakov gave Rachel a little secret password, and he said, under the chuppah, when your face is covered with a veil, I'm going to give you a password, and you say that word to me, I'll know it's you. And it actually says that the word was Chana, which is the three mitzvot that God gave woman. Chala, mitzvah of mikvah, and the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles. That was the password. And you know what happened? At the wedding, Laban told Rachel, you're not going to be the bride. I want this wedding dress to go on your sister, Leah. And Rachel knew there's going to be a big and big embarrassment if Leah doesn't know the password. So she gave this secret password, the word Chana, to her. Why? Because just like Leah did everything in her power to avert Rachel's shame and humiliation by having fewer children, as we spoke earlier, fewer sons, so that her sister Rachel should have at least 2 children that are 12 of the 12 tribes. Just like that, Rachel actually did the same. And on the wedding night, she whispered into Leah's ear the word Chana. So Yaakov would think that Leah was Rachel. Look at that. The sensitivity between siblings. And indeed, by the way, that's one of the reasons Jacob was allowed to marry 2 sisters, because in the Torah, you really can't marry 2 sisters. Why? Because they might fight with each other and then they'll break up the relationship. But Jacob saw how much love these 2 sisters have, the sensitivity between these 2 sisters, Rachel to Leah and Leah to Rachel. They gave up everything to protect each other's dignity. He had no concern about this. And the Medrash teaches that in the time of the destruction of the temple, the Jewish people, when they had to leave Israel, they had to go into captivity. As we know what it means, captivity, we see now all those hostages, what's taking place now in Israel. Back then, the Jews were going into captivity. They were taken away as slaves. And it says, Mother Rachel cried to God in heaven. She says, I gave up everything for my sister Leah. I gave her the passport. I didn't want to embarrass her. I did everything for my children. God, can't you save your children, Israel? They shouldn't be captives. And what does God reply? Mini koili mibech. Stop crying, Leah. Don't have to tear up. There's a great reward for your actions. I will restore your children to their home and to their land. The redemption is imminent, which is shavu banim lidvolech. And friends, so should it be today. In the merit of all the selfless love of siblings, Rachel's selfless love commitment to Leah, and Leah's selfless dedication to Rachel. Surely the beginning of our captives were released today, and God willing, many more will come. And all the descendants of Rachel and Leah, all of the Jewish people have been taken captive by the terrorists. God willing, we pray that they be redeemed very, very soon. And ultimately, may we merit that we all be redeemed from this dark exile. And we're going to merit an era where there's going to be only peace. Evil will be eradicated. We need to create light. So friends, I ask you, please, let us show sensitivity between one and the other. And let us pray to God that we merit this era when darkness will turn into light. Shabbat begins tonight in Nashville at 4:21. Please light the Shabbat candles. Create the light. And if you haven't put on tefillin yet today, go out and do that. And put an extra coin into charity. For all these actions are going to hasten the imminent coming when all captives will become free. And ultimately, when the darkness will turn into light with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days. Shabbat Shalom, my friends.